Welcome everybody to episode 12 of Money, Life and Gags with Mark and Harry. So, morning, Harry. How you going?
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Really good, mate. Really good. We're trying a new format today. So we're in two different locations. We've been in the same one. So what could go wrong?
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to talk about death now. Is that right?
No, near death, not death. We're not totally morbid, but you know, we're going to go near death experience in corporate.
Interesting.
Corporate world. And yeah, I've done a little bit of research over the weekend and come up with a few scenarios, and it'll be good just to discuss how they went about it and what they did. But these are sort of household names that most people would know, and they had near-death experiences at a corporate level, and what they did, and four very different examples of how you tackle it, because every business is different. There's no perfect formula that covers every business. So probably the first one I'll talk about is Marvel Studios. And you're familiar. Yeah, you'd be familiar with the Avengers and Thor and Iron Man and Captain America and all that. Well, going back a number of years ago, they were just a comic company and nothing else. They're just making comics. And actually, if you're familiar with DC Comics, which has like Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman, that's really way ahead of.
Well, we grew up with those super heroes. So if you remember, after primary school, for Channel 9 or Channel 7, it was Batman and Superman.
Yeah. Good old days. I can remember those two. But back then, they reached way back in the day, they reached a real pivotal point in their life cycle where the market moved ahead and people weren't buying comics as much. And so it was more of a cult following, not a mass following. And they got to the brink of bankruptcy on the back of popularity of comics, really? Changing. And so they had to make quick decisions and how are they going to survive and not lose all these great characters that have been built up over a period of time. And so they made two key changes, but the one that got them going is they had a whole bunch of characters. You've seen through the Marvel movies all the characters that they had. So they selected a couple, and they actually sold the license rights to them and to companies like Sony and New Line Cinema and these, movie companies. Or those
were they forced to sell?
They didn't sell. They sold the licensing rights.
Yeah, did they have to do a licensing agreement because of revenue purposes?
Just to survive, they had to do it. Just
okay. Sorry, but
yeah, absolutely. And so, because they were on the brink of death, and so if they didn't do something, it was going to go to administration, bankruptcy. So they licensed Blade. I don't know if you remember the Blade movie, Wesley Snipes. They licensed Spider-Man, and there's been many characters, many iterations of Spider-Man. And so that got them going. And so those movies were really successful for the companies that licensed those characters. And so on the back of that success, Marvel did two things. Number one, it gave them an opportunity to get some cash injections, and Merrill's backed them. I think I got the right, bank, Merrill Lynch, that backed them to the tune of, I think it says about $500 million or something. And that enabled them to start making their own movies. And their first one was Iron Man for Robert Downey Jr. And so on the back of that was a raving success. I can't remember the ticket sales, but it was obviously like premium type ticket sales system, a raving success. So massive return for the investors, and that became the impetus of what we know today as the Marvel cinematic universe, the MCU, and they just make movies after movies. They're probably saturating it a little bit over the last sort of 24 months, but before that, leading into like Avengers Endgame, it was like it's just so popular. And then the other thing they did is they vertically integrated. As they started having this success, then they created their own vertical integration and bought assets so they can manufacture their own merchandising materials, their figurines, all that, which is a huge business. Yeah. And then then it got taken over by Disney, and so the full turnaround strategy on the brink of bankruptcy, turned it around,
and that's all because of the licensing agreement between themselves and Sony, just to enable them to get some cash in the door.
Yeah, and it wasn't a huge amount of cash up front. I think it was more tailored to success, but the success of the movies meant they've got really good money coming through, which became the impetus for the business model. But
right.
I think, if I think about one of the key learnings of that one is if you're on the bank from bankruptcy, what are your assets that you can monetize? to avoid bankruptcy, and they could have sold the characters themselves, all the IP, but they didn't sell the IP. They licensed the IP, and I think that's
do you want to explain for our audience, like, what is licensing?
Yeah, so the Marvel own. I'll use Spider-Man just as an example.
Yep.
Marvel owned Spider-Man, the name, the character, and so forth. But what they did is they licensed it to Sony. So what that did is, without transferring the ownership of Spider-Man, Sony has the exclusive rights to use the Spider-Man character, the brand, and so forth. And down the track, what it meant for Marvel actually caused problems because Spider-Man became really popular. And they wanted to use Spider-Man in the main movies for the Avengers and so forth. And so they had to work with Sony and cut deals to get the character back into their movies, because Sony could have just said, nah, we'll just make Spider-Man movies and we don't care about you, right? But to include it in the universe that they've, this multiverse that they create and so forth, they had to cut deals with Sony. So although they own it, I don't know if it's a license in perpetuity. I don't know if it's got a fixed term. I'm not really sure of the terms, but they retained ownership but sold the license. So that meant Sony, anytime they use that character, Marvel's always going to get a cut of the pie. And so whatever revenues come from the using of that character, Marvel gets a slice. And that's distinct as selling the IP. So if you just sold that character, you get probably hard, right? If it feels the success, you would not have any money coming through on the back of that success. So that's the distinction between owning IP and licensing IP.
Cheers. But they survived via one licensing agreement.
They did 2 or 3. So they did Spider-Man and they did Blade. Blade was another one, and that was a really big success as well. And I've got a feeling there's a third one, but I can't remember who it was. But...
And geez, you would have done a lot to convince Sony then, just to get involved. But maybe Sony had their own ideas how to make it work, where they could see that the initial company, they were just treading on water. So isn't it amazing how one company is facing death and one comes into the picture and just makes it work?
Yeah, well, Marvel were not making movies at the time. They were just a comic company, making great content, great characters, but not translating it in a digital format to movies. And so that's where Sony came in, and New Line Cinemas as well. So you're right. That was a great partnership that got Marvel out of the chute, so to speak. So,
yeah, and today it's a conglomerate.
I think it's sometimes we get too close to our assets and what we are in, and so we don't see the clarity of what could be done. And so I think that's an experience that you can learn from, where just look at hardcore. What are your assets, and what can we do to monetize that asset to get ourselves out of the crap.
And did you say Disney came into the foray as well?
Yeah, it's a Disney. I'm going to say maybe 2010 or something like that. I can't remember the exact year, but Disney took them over. I think they paid like $2 billion, $4 billion, something like that. Wow. So ridiculous amounts of money were made from the depths of despair to the exit, over and above the profits that were made to get to that valuation. And
well, interesting.
A great success story.
What's the next one?
The next one I've got is FedEx. Are you familiar with FedEx? The
freight
company,
air freight
company, or air freight and so forth. So this is a really interesting story. This is literally the rolling of the dice story. So FedEx guy went to university, came up with this idea about emergency or really express freight overnight, and it was uncommon back then. It was more slower snail type mail service back then, and so he built this concept, got some funding for it, but hit the wall on the back. I think it was around would have been early 1970s. I think fuel prices were rocketing, and so it got to a point where he was on the brink, and he didn't have enough money for the next week's fuel, and without paying for the fuel, the whole business fell apart. So he had $5,000 left, which is US dollars, so more in our world, but $5,000 left, and he went to the casino, and he went and played black. He went to the casino and he went and played blackjack for the weekend, and he managed this is a true story, yeah. And his name's Freddie, we'll call him. And he went to the casino. He played blackjack all weekend, and he turned his $5,000 into, I think it was 27,000, 28,000. And he got the money to buy himself another week, so he could pay that fuel on that Monday when his fuel was owed. He could pay it, and that wasn't like all he really did doing that was buy the week, but he just said, "I'm not going to let this die." And so in that week, he managed to refinance some of it. He got a $11 million further investment for one of his largest shareholders, for General Dynamics. I don't know who they are, but and then he also managed to, from another fund, they got a line of credit to enable him to continue running the business, growing the fuel, paying for the fuel and so forth. And then the rest is history after that. And all he needed was that extra week. And rather than just say, I'm bold, he was relentless. Some would say he was a bit reckless, using the last 5 to gamble.
You're not suggesting to our audience that they should go to the casino if they're in a death experience.
No, not suggesting that at all. No, but it does show, and even though, like, I think most people, if they're going to the casino to try and save their company, would probably go to the roulette table and go red and black and try and just double immediately. But he must have had a skill set in blackjack and so forth, and so he actually backed himself. He was quite methodical. He spent 2 days at a casino playing blackjack. So there's a lot of hands you've got to get through that. So he would have had his ups and downs through that journey. And then he cut at the exact time that he had the money to cover his next week's fuel. And so he was very methodical about it. It wasn't like, even though he used gambling as a format to try and save his company, he wasn't reckless in his gambling. He was not quite methodical in his gambling. So there's a difference there.
And today, FedEx is massive.
Yeah, never look back. And so those companies that backed him in the early days, I don't know if they're still there or not, but they would have made a handsome amount of money. But that's he was down to his last $5,000. So,
and $5,000 then, let me think about it. We're talking 1973?
Yeah, around 73. Yeah. The company went public in 78.
78. So $5,000 US. Was that a lot of money in the early 70s? Well, yeah, it was.
Compared to now, yeah. Well, yeah,
you probably was.
Yeah, what would he 3 years old? You tell me. Yeah.
Wow, gambling just to get her out of the shit. Oh well, if it worked, it worked. I mean, sometimes I think I don't believe in gambling, but if you're faced with a situation, and this one was completely a death experience, and you've got no other option, you've got $5,000, and you've got to make it 3, 4, 5 X. Well, how are you going to do it over a weekend if no one's going to back you? He obviously went to the casino and tried his luck, because that's all it was.
And he didn't go to the racetrack. He went to the casino and he spent 48 hours trying to win it back in increments. So, credit to the guy, right? So I don't know how each of us would have handled it. You got to be in it. But I don't get that's ballsy act.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, cheers. Well, let's go to the next one, because this one I didn't like, because bloody hell, let's go to the casino to make up all our losses. Wow.
At least he didn't go to crypto training, mate.
Oh, mate. Actually, that could have been better. But yeah.
Exactly. The next one is a really interesting story, and something I call it quite brave, because you don't often see companies take this view, but it's a company called Dominos. Domino's pizza. Yeah. So going back years and years and years ago, a guy bought one pizza shop and turned that pizza shop into a national chain across America. It was competing against Pizza Hut and some other large chain in the pizza space. But once again, faced the brink. Not dissimilar to all these examples are all about big companies that face the brink. And so CEO had to fall on his sword. The investors put on a new CEO. And this was the most pivotal thing imaginable that you could think a company would do. He basically did a whole marketing campaign and basically said the company's pizzas were shit.
Crap, Mark.
He said pizzas are shit. Yep. And said they're going to change their recipes. They're going to reinvigorate the company, but we understand why we're in the position we are, because we're capping. So he got focus groups. The focus groups were videoed telling them their pizzas were crap. and he used those in his advertising and his marketing campaigns, and it resonated a lot with the marketplace because of the honesty factor. Like, he was basically being honest, saying,
So even though he told his end consumer, our product is crap, and you're telling me consumers kept ordering?
no, not on the back of just that. So what he did is, through those focus groups, he changed all his recipes. And so the company came out with a whole new batch of recipes on their pizzas. So I'm not sure what was and what is, but he changed it all. And then the other thing he did was to bring it into what back then in the technical age was he digitized his entire operation. And so there was a digital transformation where he created, at the time, the first app for a pizza delivery company. And on that delivery, you could place all your orders, change what you wanted, track your pizza. That's it's my fault. And so between telling the market that their pizzas are crap, changing all the recipes to more tastier pizzas, and using technology, the company never looked back, and it took off. And if you think about where things are sitting now, you got Domino's as a dominant player in the pizza market, and where's Pizza Hut?
I guess it's pizza chain in the world.
Yeah, and where's Pizza Hut?
Oh yeah, gone. Yeah, gone.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's an example of.
I mean, imagine running a business and telling your consumer our product's crap.
So, it's unheard of. I don't know anyone who would do that. You think about, even in politics, they don't even own the crapness of what they do, and they're it was election through Australia at the moment, and just started, and none of them are going to own their mistakes and say, yeah, we've got to do better. They're just going to make up propaganda about their things. So they think about politics, they think about companies, corporate presentations on the earnings and things like that. That everyone thinks they've got to, they don't own. A lot of them don't own their problems. They just try and just cover it up and talk about the next, what they're doing next. And so, pretty brave move by the Domino's guy. But very successful.
Do you think the consumer is forgiving today?
I think today it's a lot harder to do something like that, because with social media and all the, we live in the land of reviews, and so to turn something around, can things be turned around? Yes, I think they can.
Yeah.
But it's not as easy as just snapping your fingers, changing, because a local business is on a global platform these days. Like, even your local restaurant is on Google reviews and other review platforms and so forth.
I mean, everything's so quick good today.
Yeah. And so people, I know a lot of people traveling, they'll say, oh, that's a bad review, I'm not going there. And so you're losing potential clientele just because of your reviews. And it takes time to change those reviews to a level where they're more positive again. So is it retrievable? Yes. Will take longer? Yes.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's a great story. And, put on that CEO for having the gumption to take the after.
Well, that's come out of left field, to come at the marketplace and say, my product's not good. I guess the consumer then may have been more forgiving. And if the consumer saw that the company was honest, maybe the consumers turned around and said, you know what, I'm going to give you another opportunity.
Who knows? Yeah. And it's like a domino effect. So enough to intend. But, when they changed their recipes and their marketing campaigns were obviously very slick, to themselves, to rebrand themselves, to reposition themselves, then, it only takes a few people to start talking about,
of course.
Did you try the new Domino's? Their pizzas are actually good, and you've got to see this, it's fantastic. And they just flies.
Yeah.
The names and changes from that. And so I think as consumers, we are forgiving, but here today, we're a lot more damning than they used to be. Like back in the day, you'd have to almost, it's just word of mouth how things happen, not social media platforms.
Do you know what I find? It's interesting what you say about word of mouth. I still think that word of mouth today is more powerful than actual reviews, but here's the hypocrisy. Exactly what you said about restaurants. Most people click onto their mobile phones and they look at the reviews today far more than anything else, whereas before social media, word of mouth, Mark, was very powerful.
And that's how you got it. That's how you got it. So
you didn't like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. incredible.
I look at marketing in general. Like, I don't know if you remember back in the day, mate, but there used to be 2 volumes of yellow pages like this thick.
Oh, I do remember.
But thousands of dollars to be, the full page out of a horticulture ad. And you look at it today, there's no books around anymore, although there might be little yellow pages going around, but no one uses books anymore. Everyone just uses Google, I'll Google it, or that if it's a restaurant, they might use OpenTable or whatever, the platforms are. So technology has taken over all of that, which means a company succeeding or failing on the back of public perception is accelerated like hundreds.
Yeah. I mean, talking about Yellow Pages, you may or may not remember Telstra owned Yellow Pages in Australia. And they were giving someone wanted to buy them out. I think it was a private equity firm. And it was voted. Yeah, I do. Yes, I do. No, I do because I was a Telstra shareholder. So I often looked into the announcements they were making, because Telstra initially, when they flooded, they were making big money and the share price went through the roof, and then it started coming down because telecommunications wasn't sexy anymore, and Telstra had to divest some assets, and they were given some stupid offer for Yellow Pages. They didn't take it, only to find that Yellow Pages went to zero, because even Telstra were not aware how technology could transform the entire landscape. So that's how fast technology has actually moved. If look today at AI. I mean, AI, which I know very, very little, that's going to transform everything, Mark. Everything over the next 3 to 5 years. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's those that embrace it will do well, and those that stubborn to it or don't want to embrace it, they'll get left behind.
Yeah, indeed. What's next, mate?
So the last one for today, which is more at the luxurious end of the market. But are you familiar with the story the Ferrari and Lamborghini and how the Lamborghini was born?
I don't know the story between Ferrari and Lamborghini, but I am aware that Lamborghini used to be a tractor company.
Exactly right. Yeah,
that's all I know. That transformed itself into a sports car.
Yeah. So here's the funny story, right? And this is where, like, sometimes being nice means you don't get bitten on the ass. Although, I've got to say, Ferrari's still successful, so
yeah,
it's not as they were. But an enemy was born on this particular day. So Ferruccio Lamborghini was the guy's name, and he was a tractor manufacturer, and he did really well for himself in that space. And so he bought himself a Ferrari, because when you get to that level of wealth, that's what people do. And so he had this Ferrari, and he noticed there was a clutch problem. And so him being the engineer that he is, he couldn't help himself. So he went inside the inner workings of a Ferrari, and what he found was this clutch was the exact same clutch that was in his tractors.
Oh,
yeah, same clutch, and he was paying $100 as wholesale for these clutches, and Ferrari was trying to sell him $1,000 for the clutch. And he goes, "Boy, what's going on here? Like, I can buy it for $100, you sell it for $1,000. That's rubbish, right? It's the exact same thing." So I'm not sure how he orchestrated this, but obviously he had the right network. So he organised a meeting with Enzo Ferrari back in the day, and tried to explain to him about this clutch and and you're ripping off and all this sort of stuff. And effectively Enzo said to, you're a tractor car. You go stay at Tractors. We'll stay where we are. Thank you, but go away, get out. So, but basically, I might be putting mayonnaise on this, but he effectively got kicked out of the meeting. And so he was a man scorned. Like, he was like, you're not going to treat me like that. Typical Italian mentality, and so from that day, he invested the money he was making out of tractors. He invested towards making sports cars. And so he hired the people, he developed the cars and so forth. And it might have been a year, 18 months. I'm not sure the period from when he started this project, but then he launched the first Lamborghini, and his target was, I'm going to make it more luxurious than the Ferrari. I'm going to make it faster than the Ferrari. I'm going to make it cheaper than the Ferrari.
Oh, really? Cheaper too. Okay.
Cheaper, yeah, because he knew Ferrari's parts were exaggerated at their retail level, and so he could source all the parts as well, and so the first Lamborghini was born and sold like hotcakes, and so all of a sudden, where Mr. Enzo Ferrari told him to bugger off, all of a sudden he had a big phobe on his hands, and so that's how the Lamborghini story started, and now they were successful for years and years, as was Ferrari. but what outside of the revenge tactics, the key thing for his success for the Lamborghini was he viewed the marketing undertaken by Ferrari. He viewed them as targeting race car drivers, like people who want to be race car drivers and that sort of stuff. Where the Lamborghini marketing was targeted towards business owners who could afford a car of that nature, wanted a performance vehicle, but also wanted the luxuries again. I didn't want a full race car experience because I don't know if you've ever been in a race car, they're quite comfortable. They're more for racing, not for cruising. And so he created the more comfortable version of these performance cars. And it resonated with the marketplace, and then never looked back. And then he looked.
And this all started because of a bloody clutch. So much need on it.
Yeah,
amazing that things get started.
I know. I don't know of any people that would go to that extent on, okay, well, I bought a Ferrari. I'm going to look inside the Ferrari. I don't like something I see, so I'm going to compete against Ferrari. No, that's, that'd be like us saying, I bought an iPhone. We look inside the iPhone. Oh, geez, those components are a lot cheaper than we pay the retail price for this whole phone. Of course, I'll start my own phone company. I think a serious amount of gumption and backing to have that strategy. And that's what he did. That's probably today's equivalent. That's what he did. So, yeah. So I think there's some key takeaways through these 4 stories that we've just spoken about. And, keen to hear your thoughts on it, but then I'll share mine. But there's a lot of learnings you can take through history through these type of companies and how they recover from lack of prosperity and the brink of bankruptcy.
I think most people show their true colors, if I can use that analogy, that when they're desperate, the best comes out of them. Like they will do, I mean, the FedEx guy going to the casino, that's not my thing. That's just not my thing. But it obviously worked for him. But in most circumstances where people have got their backs against the wall, I'm guessing now most people will just basically walk away. But there's some who have got a dogmatic attitude, a never die attitude. They'll do anything and everything just to turn it around or make it happen. I mean, the one with the Marvel Studios, I wasn't aware that there was a licensing agreement between themselves and Sony. But you can see that they had to do that so they can survive and prosper. And in the end, Disney comes around and buys the whole bloody thing. It was just as easy to walk away.
Absolutely, yeah, because you're just like to make, you're a rad trader really. So you're just making comics and not much else. A lot of publications just die. And so, in all of these examples, the one commonality amongst all of them that I see is mindset. The power of strong mindset. That this is not going to get me. I'm going to overcome whatever hurdles come in front of me. I'm going to smash through and overcome them. And so if anyone's listening and you want to take something away, I think mindset is the key takeaway here. Just be relentless. Don't get caught in the weeds of your problem. Just come up a level and say, okay, how do I solve to this problem?
And I think I think if you do that also, I mean, I look back and when I was in trouble, I obviously didn't like how I felt. It's just a shit feeling, Mark. It's really bad feeling. It's really bad. Today, when I look back, I'm almost at the point where I say to myself, I'm grateful I went through that experience. A, it made me stronger. B, it gave me perspective. And the last and most important thing, if it happens to me again, I actually know what to do. I may not know what my issues are, but I actually know how to get out of it because I've gone through it. Does that make sense? You always go that way, to succeed.
Yeah, well, I think you said it a bit earlier. The greatest learnings come from the brinks of failures because you develop that level of bravery that that is
because no one is successful. No one is successful 100% of the times. I mean, they're just not. At some point in time, they're going to hit a roadblock, and it's how you handle the roadblock and how you come out of it. Now, some people may spend a minimal amount of time dealing with crap, and that's fine. It could be because of their skill set. Other people like myself may have to spend a lot of time sorting out the crap, but as long as you get out on the other end, you actually set up a template for yourself moving forward that you can handle anything.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other thing people forget also is you're not always alone. That the problem doesn't have to be yours solely. I'm a big believer you surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. And that doesn't mean you're dumb. It just means there's areas where people have an expertise that you're not expertised in. And so you bring that expertise around you. So I'm sure the Domino's guy didn't come up with everything all on his own. He went up and guru in there that tested this theory, created the content, and so you have the right people around you to help you, get yourself out of the shit if your company's in the shit, and then thrive. Too many companies just worry about survive, but they don't focus on the thrive, because surviving just means you're going to repeat and go back into to the brink at some point. Where if you survive and then thrive, that's Nirvana. That's what you want to do. And,
Indeed.
all interesting topic.
Interesting topics. Now the FedEx guy is going to stay in my mind now. So, again, it just was. All right, mate. What a great.
Sorry.
All right, mate. What a great episode, mate. Thanks a lot for that, and looking forward to the next episode.
Thanks very much, Eric.
Cheers, mate.
Bye.